be a great meeting, and look forward to hearing your input as we go forward today. So this is our annual meeting, and we need to approve the agenda. Excuse me, George, do we need to introduce ourselves before we get to the agenda?
Yeah, we should do it to make it official.
Okay, I'll start. We'll go around the Zoom horn here. Kevin Miller, Chippewa Falls, present. Let's start with Karen Ann, since you're first on my screen.
And first in your heart,
We
no
just-
doubt. Karen Ann
All right.
Huffman, Stevens Point, Wisconsin.
All right. I'm going to call it out now rather than guessing on the Zoom. Lakita.
I am here. Lakita Caldwell, Milwaukee.
Great. Jane Herring.
Jane Herring, Kenosha.
We said John's not here yet. John Johnson is not here yet. Brian Kelsey.
I am present and from Door County.
Excellent. Leah Kolb.
Present. Sorry about that. Finding the microphone. Present and in Madison, Wisconsin.
Fabulous. We'll go back up. I see John Johnson has arrived, so we'll check him off here and he can say hello.
Hi there.
Tell us where you are. Karen Ann's at an archaeological dig. Tell people where you are today.
I am in the public library in Viroqua, Wisconsin. I am out camping by a trout stream, and so I came in to use our great Wisconsin public library Wi-Fi systems.
Excellent.
And I hope you can hear me. I have to have my mask on.
You're totally fine.
Susan Lip. She's here but muted.
Yep.
There we go.
George, did you call me?
I just did, yes.
I don't know what happened to my speaker, but I have no sound here. So I'm just kind of watching your mouth.
Your lip reading skills will be important.
I'm in Madison right now.
Fair enough. All right, thank you. John Potter.
Present in Hudson.
President Hudson. Gerard Randall.
Here.
Excellent. Mary Reinders.
Here from Mahor, Wisconsin.
All right. Lynn Ritchie.
Present from Land O'Lakes, Wisconsin.
Fabulous. Jennifer Schwarzkopf, not here yet as far as I can see. All right. And Bob Wagner.
Present in Milwaukee from Mequon.
And Matt Wallach.
Present from McFarland.
All right. Very good. Mr. Miller, carry on.
Well, we need to approve our agenda, and knowing how diligent you all are, I know you've perused the agenda. Can we get a motion to approve said agenda?
I'll move, Gerard.
Thank you,
Second,
Gerard.
Wagner.
We have a second with Bob. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, our agenda is officially approved. George, we have the report of the nominating committee, and Jen's not here. How do you want to handle that?
We'll turn to Mary and Susan before I say anything. Any word that you want to put forward before?
Me?
No, either Mary Reinders or Susan.
I have not met with the committee, so I have no idea what was going on.
Fair enough.
I do have some
I have
ideas.
not, we have not met. Yeah.
All
Oh,
right.
maybe that's why.
Fair enough. So in order to expedite matters, the chair of the nominating committee sent out an email to all of the current executive committee members and asked whether they wanted to continue to serve. And all replied affirmatively. And so the issue will be to put forward that slate of nominations for the election of officers. So as a reminder, I'll go through those officers, and then we'll, it is officially supposed to be done, call for any nominations from the floor. And then we'll do what's necessary here. So the officers currently are Kevin Miller, board chair, Brian Kelsey, vice chair, Matt Wallach, secretary, John Potter is budget chair and also member at large, and Lynn Ritchie is the other member at large. So that is the executive committee of the Arts Board as of now, and the slate as is being put forward by the committee. So to proceed, I think that we should step through it chair to chair, starting first. So is there a motion right now to have the slate of, well, let's not do the slate of the nominating committee. Let's do it this way. Is there a motion for Kevin Miller to serve as board chair?
I'll make that motion. Hoffman motions for Kevin Miller to continue to serve as board chair.
I second that motion.
A second. by
Susan
Lip.
Lip.
All right, so we'll ask as they do 3 times. Are there any other nominations from the floor? Are there any other nominations from the floor? Any other nominations from the floor? 3rd time? All right, so hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 All opposed?
Aye.
Very good. All right, thank you. And Kevin, you could now take it from here, and we'll do the vice chair now. We'll seek a nomination for the vice, for Brian Kelsey.
Yes. Do we have a nomination? Do we have a
Motion.
motion for Mr. Kelsey to be vice chair?
So
I'll make
moved.
a motion, Richie.
Then I'll second Herring.
We get the second.
Yep.
Any discussion?
Well, we need to have the nominations from the floor. So
Three times. Do we have any nominations from the floor? For the second time, do we have any nominations from the floor? And from the 3rd time, any nominations from the floor? Hearing none. All in favor of Mr. Kelsey as vice chair? Are we in favor?
Yay.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, Mr. Kelsey is so approved. All right, now we need, who's next, George, on the list?
Mr. Wallach as board secretary.
Secretary Wallach. We need a motion to approve Matthew.
So moved, Gerard.
Thank you, Gerard. Do we have a second?
I was expecting crickets.
Kids can't vote here. Do we have a second?
Richie, I'll make a second.
Thank you, Lynn. Okay, any nominations from the floor for secretary? I will ask the second time, any nominations from the floor for secretary? And 3rd time's the charm, any nominations from the floor for secretary? Hearing none, do we all in favor of Secretary Wallach continuing to serve?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Excellent. Who's next? Is it treasurer?
Yeah, so John as the chair of the budget committee and member at large in this instance.
Okay. We have a motion for Mr. Potter's service on the executive committee.
So move, Wagner.
Hoffman, so moved.
I heard Bob first. Can we get a second?
I'll second. That'll be Hoffman, second.
Now I hear Karen in. Excellent. So any nominations from the floor to be chair of the budget committee and member at large? Second time for the call for the chair of the budget committee, member at large. 3rd time for the chair of the budget committee and member at large. All in favor of John Potter's service?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. John, now who's next? Is it Lynn?
It is Lynn.
Lynn as member at large. Do we have a motion for Lynn's service to continue?
I so move, Lip.
Second.
I second that.
Who is the second?
Whoever wants.
Mary Reinders.
Oh, Mary Youngers. Secretary Wallach, did you catch that? Just checking to see if he's there. Do we have any nominations from the floor for Lynn Ritchie to serve as member at large on the executive committee? The second time we'll put out the call for Lynn Ritchie on as member at large of the executive committee, and third time.
And just to be technically correct, it is there anybody else to serve as member at large? So just to be technically correct, it's an invitation for others to come forward.
Gotcha.
I just want to make sure we get it right.
Yeah, right. Hearing none from the floor. All in favor of Lynn Ritchie serving as member at large on the executive committee? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. Carries. Motion carries.
Very good. Uh-oh. Are you there, Kevin?
Yeah.
Okay, so next is the appointment of committees. And in your packet, you got a list of the committees. In the board book, there was a list of the committees. What we were hoping for from you at this time is to really look at that list. If you're on a committee that you want to stay there, you don't have to do anything. You'll stay there. If there's a committee you wanted to serve on, but you don't see your name in, you certainly can make that known here. Or if there's a committee you're on that you would like to not serve on any longer, you can make that known here as well.
George, is the bylaws really the committee of one of me, or is it a task force?
Well, it's you as a chair, but when it happens, it's a task force. You're right. It's an ad hoc thing that comes together when the time comes to do it.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to do you want blanket motions, or I'm assuming we've all looked at this, or do you want individual by committee?
If everyone's had a chance to review, is there anybody that doesn't want to continue to serve on those committees? Speak now and forever hold your peace.
This is Karen Ann. Can I just confirm, Chair of the Woodland Indian Arts Initiative? I'm not able to open the attachments.
You are the chair.
You're listed.
Perfect, perfect. I love that. Thank you.
You're also listed, Karen Ann, just to be
transparent,
is with the Poetry Out Loud
yes.
liaison.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, I recommend we do a blanket. If everyone's good with that, with the rosters as they are, let's do, full blanket approval.
Then I'll make a motion to approve the committee structures and members as presented in the board materials. Kelsey.
Excellent. We have
Johnson,
second.
Johnson, second.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion? Hearing none.
Well, hang on 1 second. I just want to, for the clarity, the bylaws say that the chair makes these appointments. And so like Bruce Bernberg did, he liked to have consensus from the board as to those appointments. So, but in essence, that's what you're doing in approving these at this time. Mm-hmm. But again, I just wanted the technical clarity there.
So we didn't need to have a motion to approve that?
No, basically you're getting consensus from the board. So the motion is fine. It's just making sure as it relates to the bylaws, you appoint and the board can offers consensus.
So
I vaguely remember that.
I'll characterize it as a recommendation.
For ratifying is it ratifying the?
Yeah. Well, the motion we're recommending to Kevin.
Right. The way Brian had worded it, right, is the recommendation from the board. We're approving the recommendation from the board. So yeah. So
yeah, you're approving.
Right.
Okay.
So question is then we all vote here just like always, or is it
again you're offering consensus? The essentially what happened is you appoint these people and the board says, way to go. We're with that. So that's what this is.
All right. So we've had the first and the second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right. So ends the executive committee meeting with a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Gerard moves. There's no need for a second.
Right. And so now we can jump ahead to the quarterly meeting.
Well, I think we ought
Okay,
pause
adjourn.
since we said the quarterly meeting is going to start at 10:30.
Okay. Oh, right.
At 10:40, does it say?
It says 10:45 on my agenda.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a long time. You got about a half an hour here. So I think we'll just go ahead. We'll go ahead.
We can go ahead.
Yeah. It should be okay.
Excellent. All right. Welcome to the, do we have to reintroduce ourselves for this? We probably do, right? Even though we just did it for the annual meeting, we need to keep everything copacetic.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll start the introductions for the second quarter meeting here, 2021. Kevin Miller from Chippewa Falls. George, why don't you do what you did last? Let's go through the roster.
Yeah, we'll do. Lakita Caldwell,
Hi.
Jan Herring,
I'm here, still from Kenosha.
Karen Ann Hoffman,
Here.
John Johnson,
Present.
Brian Kelsey,
Present.
Leah Kolb,
Here.
Susan Lipp,
Here.
John Potter,
Present.
Gerard Randall,
Here.
Mary Reinders,
Here.
Lynn Ritchie,
Present.
Jennifer Schwarzkopf. For those of you who don't know, Jennifer just started a new position, so she may not have been able to get out of that this morning. Bob Wagner,
Present.
Matt Wallach,
Present.
and by the way, we didn't introduce the staff last time, so this gives us a great opportunity to do that. Karen Geschko,
Here.
Dale Johnson,
I'm here.
and Caitlin Burrell.
Here.
All right,
Excellent.
here we go.
We need to approve the agenda that George sent out. We have a motion.
So moved.
Richie, second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. We need to approve the minutes from your March 16th, 2021 meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'd just like to note that I did not include the secretary's name under this section, so my apologies to the secretary. It should say Wallach here.
Never apologize. We have a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved,
Johnson.
Kelsey. Oh,
Johnson,
oh,
second.
Who was the second?
Johnson.
Oh, thank you.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the minutes?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. We're moving on to the Budget Committee update. Mr. Potter and of course, George.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm going to ask George to give us an update on the current fiscal year, which isn't much different from our last board meeting. Our upcoming fiscal year beginning July 1 and an update on the NEA rescue plan funding, as well as anything else that you might have an update on since we last spoke. George, if you would be so good.
Fair enough. Thank you so much, John. So yes, the current fiscal year, what I will do is I'll point you to the page, and I don't have a page number, so you guys with page numbers will tell me. The first match page that tells you about the match deficit this year, which lists as $30,800 that we're short in this fiscal year. And so this is important to the latter conversation about joint finance, because joint finance is not only taking up the biennial budget, but for us, the match includes picking up whatever we're deficient in here in the current fiscal year and 22. So when they said match of $46,600 in the biennial budget, they're only off by 50,000 plus. So in the end, the deficit, which you will see soon, and when I say deficit, I mean shortage of match, is more like $119,000 in the next fiscal year. When you add the deficit in this year and the same in the next. We'll see that in a minute. In the current fiscal year, as John said, this looks a lot like the last one for a couple of reasons. The Arts Challenge Initiative has not hit this budget or hit this update. The regranting program did, however, and so that's good. As far as, let's see, I have it printed out and it's printed in this way and that way. So that's the story in AIDS. The other story in AIDS right now is because of the shortage of match, there are a couple of payments being held by DOA until the match comes through, which is another example of why this is so hard on not only us, but more importantly on our constituents who have to deal with that. As far as the operational costs, they're pretty much in alignment with what we had said they were going to be. Clearly, there's no travel, so you'll see that there is no money changing hands on the travel line in this fiscal year. And generally, that's it. The only other thing about this current fiscal year is that Poetry Out Loud, which happened, and by the way, I hope you saw that our entrant won the Poetry Out Loud competition for the Poetry Ourselves. So her poem that she wrote herself was a runner-up on the national level. And you would have seen that in the Arts News, and we also put it in our social media. So the amount of money is $20,000. There is no way we're going to spend $20,000 in Poetry Out Loud. But what's happening is the Poetry Out Loud coordinator is giving us all of the invoices at once. And so that's the next document you see of this Poetry Out Loud will be complete as well. Any questions on the current fiscal year? Because the next one's really interesting. Okay, let's talk about the next fiscal year. So you will see that the Arts Board is going to receive from the National Endowment for the Arts $887,100 in the coming fiscal year. So fiscal 22, which begins July 1st. Last year, we got $813,100. Okay, so that looks like a huge increase. But remember, in fiscal 21, which we're in, we chose not to have take out the NASA dues and the Arts Midwest dues at the state level. Rather, they were taken out at the NEA level, and then the money was passed through to us. So our award was more like $854,000. But because of this, to protect us from COVID, what we received was $813,100. So it's a nice size increase in any event, and we're happy for it. Now, if you look at the match page here, you're going to see that when you take into consideration the shortfall from federal fiscal year 20, and then you add the match that's necessary in the coming fiscal year, the match differential is $119,200. So that's the number that's necessary in fiscal year 22. Okay, so that is the amount of increase that's necessary to get us to match the National Endowment for the Arts. The Department of Administration and the Legislative Fiscal Bureau both know that number. So when the discussion of the 22 budget comes up, they will be providing that information to the legislature. What I'll point to in the AIDS section on the budget is that let me first say, this is a draft budget. The budget committee is going to need to go through this and approve it and bring it to you for your approval. All right, so the reason this exercise was done at this time is to prove out that we can in fact give the Creative Communities Awards that we're about to give, right? That we have the dollars set aside for that. Now, returning to the AIDS conversation, the Arts Challenge Initiative is up from 57,000 to 60,000. Creation and presentation is up. The Creative Communities dollars that are reflected here in fiscal 22 are directly in correlation with what you saw as what is being distributed. We found an additional $7,000 to put into folk arts apprenticeships. And you'll see that other aids is the reinstatement of the Arts Midwest investment at the state level, rather than having it taken out on the national level. All of that, adding Woodland Indian Arts Initiative and the state operations, gets us to the 887,100 number. On the federal side, there's been an increase to the underserved communities portion of our state partnership with the NEA. So that amount has gone up for creation and presentation. So instead of 724,000 last year, if our match holds, we'll be able to do 781. But as I said to John, if our match doesn't hold, part of what we'll do is we'll take back those dollars from creation and presentation. My great hope is that will not be necessary. Also on the federal side, arts education is a direct match to what we're receiving from the NEA. So 32.3 on the state side is because of 32.3 on the federal side. And we have 35,000, which is the number from our state partnership with the NEA for the apprenticeship program. And then finally, on the federal side, as far as aids are concerned, is the $12,000 provided to Arts Wisconsin. So if you take that and the ops, you'll see on the next page, that gets us to the 887.1. Any questions about the aids section before I go to ops? Turning the page, whichever way I'm supposed to be turning it. Now, if you look at the page that says federal detail or ops, FY22 ops detail is what it's titled. The salary and fringe numbers are confirmed by DOA, so those are real numbers. On the state side, we've reinvested $2,000 for the travel to the National Arts Advocacy Summit. One hopes that in 22, there will actually be such a summit in DC. It was virtual this year and it was quite wonderful. We'll talk about that later. We've also moved the telephone to the state side because we needed operational expense, and it makes sense that the state pay for our phones. You'll note, by the way, that we are now voice over IP. So our phones ring on our computers wherever we are. So that's something that's new and was done in advance of our move, which will take place in July. Contractual services, we had there last time. Indirect costs on the state and federal side are an average that was provided by DOA. And there's $5,300 unallotted at this moment in case there's something we need to do on the state side. All that and adding in the Woodland Indian, again, you see below the chart gets us to 887.1. On the federal side, we've added back travel. So you've got the travel and the staff travel and the board travel and the non-state employee travel, which is our panelist travel. Again, nobody's traveling yet, but we're hopeful that come September, things will get more back to normal and we'll be on the road again, to quote a Willie Nelson song. Contractual services includes the Arts and Economic Prosperity fee, which I showed you the contract in the materials that came here. We have a decision to make, and the budget committee will help us with this decision, but the question is, do you pay for it all on the front end here in fiscal 22, or do you break it up over the biennium and reduce the cost to 22 here? The total right now, I believe, is $21,000 for the study and the visit from the senior vice president in charge of research after the study is complete. What's important about this, and I'll say it now so I don't forget this thread later, when the Arts Board invests in the arts and economic prosperity studies, local communities get their study for half price. So in the case of the past, Door County wants in, they're paying half what they would have paid because the Arts Board has invested. Same is true in Dane County, same is true in Milwaukee, etc. And I feel comfortable this year in saying that Milwaukee will be back in. Last time we did this, Milwaukee was not, there was no real local arts agency to lift up that work last time we did this.
George, could you clarify?
Yeah.
When I looked at the contract with Americans for the Arts, is that match available after October 21st of this year? Did I read it correctly or incorrectly as to when folks need to make a decision?
So for me, it's the decision is when do we want to pay? As far as when they want to get in, is that your question?
Yeah, I'm talking about those that we would match, the communities or the organizations that we would match.
Right. We don't, just to be clear, we don't match them. It's our investment that allows them to pay half price. We're not doing that. Having said that, Americans for the Arts is out really banging the drum right now with communities across the nation to try to get them in. They're going to be extraordinarily flexible this go around because of COVID.
Okay.
So they're not going to give up on somebody just because they said no right away. They're gonna keep working with them to try to get them in.
Good to know. So once we pass I'm just concerned about when we actually pass the budget and the timing on that.
Right. So it's a great point. And for us, it's in the fiscal year. As long as the board signals they want to be in this business, unless of course we don't have the money for it, which I don't think will be the case. I think people are going to operate under the assumption that the Arts Board is in. But we won't, to your very important point, we won't confirm an Arts Board budget until we know what's coming down from the legislature, right? It makes no sense for us to say, this is our FY22 budget, and then have them say, you know what, we're not going to, we'll give you the 46 that we told you we'd give you in the governor told you he'd give you in the state budget, but we're not going to go beyond that. Well, there's a domino effect there, which means we not only not get all of our federal money, but we're going to be short of the state side too. So, two more pieces here. One is the subscription dues and memberships. These are NASA dues, again, back into our budget, not last year, but it is this year, with Americans for the Arts dues, as well as the American Folklore Society dues. And the other thing I'll point out is the good news coming out of the Department of Tourism, twofold. One is, as we move to the new space, it's going to make no sense for us to have our own copy printer scanner thing, because we don't have the room for that, given the space that we've got allotted to us. So tourism is going to take on the cost of that second printer for them, first printer for us. So it used to travel on our line with a $4,000 expense, and that's gone. So that's a happy note. The other happy note out of tourism this week is I've been trying to get them to tell us what our move costs are going to be so that we can prepare for that. What they told us is, don't worry about it. They will pick up the moving cost. So we will not have to worry about the outlay for the moving company, et cetera. So that's a generous offer from the secretary and the administrative people of tourism, which we humbly accept.
That's wonderful. George, can I ask a question going back? For the Americans for the Arts, I mean, that is something that we're not going to be looking at cutting from the budget. So if I can't imagine, because it's the biggest tool we have to advocate for the ROI of investments in the arts. So does it make more sense to expend all that money right up front and paying it in full? I'm looking to you from that standpoint, rather than breaking it in part, just saying we commit in full, here's our payment, communities come in, you make your pay, you can join as well. Just knowing that that report is our powerhouse to go back and say, look, this is why you need to invest more. And it's it's the key piece when we speak to legislators about how we can prove the power of the arts from an economic engine standpoint.
Most definitely. And know that Americans for the Arts is very flexible as to how they receive those dollars. So once we're committed and we're in, it won't matter to the field, and it won't matter to Americans for the Arts when they get their money, as long as we're in and signed on the dotted line, right? So I think it's going to be a question of the budget committee looking at all of the variables that are coming at us to say whether putting $21,000 up front is good use of those dollars, or do we need to carry that over the 2 fiscal years so that we're not taking more money away from grants, right? If that's a choice that has to be made. So those are the kind of considerations I think the budget committee has to get to when we make that decision.
Okay, that makes sense. I just wanted to verify that even if it was a partial payment, that I didn't want something in the next biennium or the next budget, suddenly it's like that money's not there and suddenly we can't make the second payment. I don't want to be in that situation.
Right, absolutely. Any other questions? The only other thing I didn't tell you about is Poetry Out Loud, and Poetry Out Loud again got $20,000. God bless them. I don't know how they do it. And so our Poetry Out Loud coordinator continues to try to make sure that this program spreads around the state. And John, this is where we turn to you and DPI and say, any help you can give in getting this program into the minds of teachers and principals, et cetera, going forward, I think would be really helpful.
I'd love to help with that. We have some good angles on that we could work on.
That's excellent. Would you, by the way, tell our friends on the Arts Board your great news coming out of the department?
Yeah, sure. So it's hard to speak in this mask, but I'm in a public library. But last week, the state superintendent-elect Underly announced that she was appointing me to be the deputy state superintendent of public instruction starting in July. So I will be, thank you. Thanks. I'll be very honored to take on that role and to work for the kids and their families and our educators across the state and our public libraries as well. So I'm looking forward to the challenge. It's a big challenge. Absolutely. But there's a lot of work to do, and I'm very happy to serve with State Superintendent Underly. She's great.
And you are well positioned and well what's the word? Well experienced for the task at hand. So good for you.
Thank you, George.
George, is this a good time to talk about external relations and talking about the budget?
I think, do you want to talk about FY22 or you want to talk about everything, including the ARPA?
No, just talking about the email that you communicated out to Joint Finance Committee members and whatnot.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay. The External Relations Committee had met, and we're looking at what sort of communications what sort of effect we could have on educating the Joint Finance Committee members of the importance of tourism. And after many spend cycles working with Jane, George, and myself, George settled on a letter that he had sent out to each member of the Joint Finance Committee, and with the help of Dale, and the data he was able to pull was to show the impact the arts have in their individual areas that they represent, and talking about how important the arts are, not just to the state, but to their local communities. And then also included in that was the Nassau state ranking showing Wisconsin at 49th only by default of Arizona totally defunding their arts. So we would still be at 50th. So I thought it was a great piece that went out. We'll only know, I don't think we'll ever know the impact it has. George did receive follow-up from one legislator, just acknowledgement of it, correct? That it had been received. But I think it was a crucial piece to get out to those key influencers on the budget process so that they understand that the arts were the first to shut down, were some of the hardest hits, and are going to be the last to stand back up. So making sure that the support is there. So it's our hope that not just through this, the budget cycle, and as you saw from one of George's documents of things that were struck, at least our match wasn't struck from joint from the large documents of things that they're looking to strike from the budget. So that was very nice to see that at least the match was still there. But as George said, we have a ways to go as he talks about, what the true match needs to be. So we'll continue working with George and Karen and Caitlin and Dale on making sure that we best represent the needs of the arts to all those who need to be evangelized.
Thank you, Brian. And it's a perfect opportunity to turn to Karen Ann. As we talk about what happened with joint finance, yesterday they got down to business, and in so doing, they eliminated a number of things that were in the governor's budget. As Brian articulated, not the match for the Arts Board and not for the Creative Economy Development Initiative, but they in fact eliminated the $100,000 for the Mound project at UW Stevens Point. And so I asked Karen Ann if she'd say a few words about that.
I appreciate that opportunity, George, and I appreciate everybody here on the call listening in. Clearly, we're disappointed to see this strike happen, but we are not surprised at all. I would say in terms of advocating on behalf of the Arts Board, although I am still fully passionate about having an acknowledgement of the mass native burial on the UWSP grounds happen, I am most passionate that our matches be made, that the increase in the match that the Wisconsin Arts Board needs to do its good work be made. And in the best of all my possible dreams, all of that money comes through. But I had said to George earlier, if we find ourselves in a position where advocating for one or the other becomes the operative choice, then I would be in support of advocating for our budget matches and the increases there. Because we as an institution can do the most good for the most people with those matches. And because the committee that's working on the acknowledgement is currently aware of the striking and pursuing some private fundraising measures that perhaps we can utilize if the budget doesn't come through. So thank you all for all your support. We are still hopeful that the budget will pass with the $100,000 with the acknowledgement in it. But please know that I understand if push comes to shove, that we need to advocate for the matching grant increases first and foremost. Is that a fair assessment, George, of what you and I spoke about?
That is perfect. And as Lynn Ritchie is our witness, it's in fact.
That's right.
So, absolutely. So thank you, Karen.
My
Okay, for
question
sure.
is,
Yeah,
do
George.
we have a champion in each of the four caucuses, the two caucuses in the Assembly and the two in the Senate, that are members of the Joint Finance Committee that can champion our budget?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say to you, we do not have such champions at this time. Our champions of the past are no longer with us. And there are some emerging champions. I would say Senator Ballweg is a champion that's emerging for the arts. But on the Democratic side, certainly Senator Bewley, who's in leadership on the Senate side, is a champion. So champions are building, I would say, Gerard.
I would argue we need to be a lot more strategic about how this budget process is going to move through and who we need to advocate for us. I've always been a believer that if you're not in the room, you don't get a chance to see what's going to happen to you or for you. And maybe a little bit earlier in the process, should have identified at least one key person in each caucus that understood our budget and could rally troops around it. Given the timing of the discussions that are going on now with the budget, I don't suppose it's too late, but to at least identify champions in the Republican caucus that can at least understand and be sympathetic to the budget, because they're the ones that are recrafting. And I'm more than happy to spend some time with you next week to talk about who some of those possibilities might be.
We would welcome that. Absolutely, Jordan.
Right?
Yeah, very much
I'd
so.
like to be on that call too. You know, listening to you talk, Gerard, too, this would be a good opportunity for us to reach out, I think, to the governor's office as well. Because if you look at it, you look at the Arts Board in the bigger picture, advocates for the governor's budget as a whole, right, is going to need a lot of, besides just our piece of it, and they might be able to help us target to those that can champion our cause as well through that process. So I think there's a couple of levels to this conversation. So I'd love to be in on that as well, Gerard.
Just a reminder to everyone is that, you know, from the external relations, we do reach out to all of you. So just always keep your thinking caps on, because we, you know, for the past couple of meetings, we've talked about reaching into the legislators. So as you guys might know people, it's critical at that time you bring that up as well, so that we can try to stay ahead of the curve. But Gerard, thank you so much for whatever you can do to help us reconnect with individuals who are within a sphere of influence to help us.
Happy to.
And Jane, just so you know, it was Representative Neubauer who reached back to us and said she's a champion for the arts. So just so you know, your homegrown talent is in favor. So we're still in the budget. Any other questions about FY22 itself before we move on to looking at the next set of money that's coming our way, the American Rescue Plan money? I'll just note as we carry forward from here to there, Brian, you saw the NASA piece that was here at the Arts Investment Fact Sheet. And I just put that out there for the board to see and think about how external relations might craft something Wisconsin-like out of that. Obviously, this is crafted for Wisconsin, but something that was crafted specifically from Wisconsin. All right, the American Rescue Plan is going to provide $828,200 from the National Endowment for the Arts to the Wisconsin Arts Board. It will be amended to our FFY 20 National Endowment for the Arts grant. So we will not be getting a new grant, but just like the CARES Act was amended to FFY 19, this one's going to be amended to FFY 20. The purpose of these dollars are for 5 things: salary support, artist fees and stipends, facility costs, and new to the ARPA money that wasn't part of CARES, health and safety costs, and then finally, marketing and promotion. So helping people get back to museums and theaters, etc. The exact mechanism for doing that is not available to us yet because we're exploring all of the opportunities that are out there. For example, the Wisconsin Humanities got a similar amount of money from the National Endowment for the Humanities. And while the restrictions are that these dollars cannot be commingled, in other words, humanities and arts money can't go together and then be just distributed, a process that would bring together an application, a single application, and a single adjudication for both organizations would provide some level of efficiency. So we're exploring that. So that we will come back to you with how that program we would propose is structured and distributed. That is not for today's conversation, except to know that we are in receipt of the message that says 828 to, and how to best spend that is the question. What we don't know yet is whether the governor will have, like he did with CARES, any money flow through DOA for the nonprofit arts. We just don't know that yet. So we're doing our due diligence to put together a program that makes sense. Know that the endowment, while through CARES, their most important thing was to get it out fast because the world was hurting. This administration says fast isn't good enough because fast doesn't necessarily get you accountability. And they're very interested in making sure that communities of color and rural communities are not disadvantaged by the way the dollars are distributed. And so again, for us, we're going to have to figure out how to best do that work. And the final thing I'll say about the ARPA money is, like CARES, the endowment is allowing $50,000 stay with the state agency for its own costs related to things like this. With CARES, we decided we were going to push it out the door because that's who we are. We want as much money into the field as we can get. Unfortunately, what ended up happening was DOA decided that they were going to take their pound of flesh out of the dollars. And so we're not going to let that happen this time. In other words, since there's money for administration, let the money for administration pay for it. Let's not go into our regular budget to support what that is. So any questions about the American Rescue Plan, where it is right now? Okay. I think, Mr. Potter, that's it, unless I forgot to say something that you and I talked about before.
Thank you, George. That was very good.
Excellent. Thanks, George. All right, moving on to the Creative Community Panel recommendations. Mary and Caitlin, take it away.
Okay, I'm going to start off and let you know that on Monday, April 19th, Caitlin and I met with 4 of the 5 grant panel reviewers to discuss applications and funding priorities. We got 13, which is pretty low for us, but not surprising during a COVID year where a lot of arts education organizations were kind of knocked out from being able to do in-person programming or not knowing what's going to happen in the coming year. All but 2 were recommended for funding. And the good news is because we had fewer applications, we're able to fund them at the full level. We had really good input from our outstanding reviewers. I would say that they did a great job looking for specific outcomes and impact-based criteria. along with sort of the depth and the richness of the experience for the maximum number of students or participants. There were some really creative applications, and they're looking good. And based on what Caitlin's telling me, they're looking better year after year with the support that the Arts Board can give them. But understanding that some of the newer ones need a little bit more support, and we would certainly encourage them to get that before submitting an application. But it's good experience all around. I'm going to pass it over to Caitlin for additional comments and to ask the board to look at funding the recommendations.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. That's great. Like Mary mentioned, it was disappointing to move forward with 4 of the 5, one panelist out, but she's an educator and was called into the classroom that morning as they're sort of reintegrating into in-person teaching. So it is what it is. And the 4 panelists that we had really stepped up and were able to give really thoughtful feedback on all 13 applications, I thought. Mary also mentioned, we had, I think it was 20 phase 2 applications last year. So down, fewer than in a typical year. But I think given the last year, I was impressed with the 13 full applications that we received. And there was really a clear, if you look at the average scores here, there was a pretty clear break between the 11th and those 12th and 13th ranked applications. So panel's recommendation was to fund those top 11. And as Mary also mentioned, great that we are able to support them at the full request amount. Panelists gave some, panelists, and then also a conversation that we had with Karen and I had this week with one of the applicants to the program, just some thoughtful feedback about both the application and the orientation process for panelists. There was a comment made during the meeting about sort of the continuum of applications that you see from orgs with varying sizes and capacities. And, she was sort of disappointed about a comment made about organizations who have grant writers on staff versus those who don't. So it was a good reminder to Karen and me that that it's important to remind the panelists in the orientation process that a professional grant writer on staff is absolutely not the expectation that we have, and the panelists need to know that. So Karen, anything you want to add there about that conversation? Great. But other than that, like I said, I think there was the panelists felt there was a pretty clear break between that 11th and 12th application. And on page 35, you can look at that ranking, and I guess we'll move forward with the approval there.
So we should look at conflicts.
Yep, we need to, anybody has a conflict with any of those organizations, potential grant recipients, we're going to go through the list now. George, just like the roll call, let's do it that way.
Yeah, I'll do it off the participant list so we know who's here. Kevin Miller. Conflicts. I take that as a no. Bob Wagner.
Is it possible to put the list back up on the site so that everybody can be reminded of who's?
Sure.
You could share
Go ahead.
too with us.
Great. Caitlin will share. All right. Is it big enough for people to see?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So Kevin said no conflicts. Since now the participant list is gone, I'll go back to my paper and know that Lakita's, I believe, gone now. She had to go back to work. Jane Herring, any conflicts?
No conflicts.
Karen Ann, I know you're having trouble with the internet, but any conflicts?
None. No conflicts.
Okay, very good. John Johnson?
None.
Brian Kelsey?
No conflicts.
Leah Kolb?
No conflicts.
Thank you. Susan Lipp?
No conflicts.
Thank you. John Potter?
None.
Okay. Gerard Randall? I think you said no conflicts.
No conflicts.
Thank you. Mary Reinders,
No conflicts.
Lynn Ritchie,
No conflicts.
Bob Wagner,
No conflicts.
and Matt Wallach.
None.
Okay, thanks. By the way, is this historic? I think, Susan, this may be the first time you ever said no conflicts. All right, so there you go, Mr. Chair. No
All right,
conflicts.
can we have a motion to approve the Creative Communities panel recommendations for the Arts and Education grant? We get a motion?
Approve, Wagner.
Second.
Ritchie, second.
We got Wagner and then second by Ritchie. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
Very good.
Moving on. Local arts? All right.
Right.
Yep.
So that's me. So that was a really good panel. They really did a very good job about reviewing this group. There were 18 that were applicants, and all 18 received money. So that was very nice to see. In conversation, one of the things that was brought up by more than one of them was the importance of having a diverse board, both racially, but also economically, as well as having diverse groups be part of the programs. And they commented on a few of the groups that were very good about making sure that they were diverse in having people participate. Karen, would you like to talk about the other comments that were made?
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. And I really appreciated you chairing for the first time a grant panel. That was fun. One of the pieces that took up a lot of time is what Lynn just talked about at the very end, the importance of projects that say that they're going to be serving racially diverse community members, but don't have anyone who is racially diverse in the project planning process or on their board. So that took up a fair amount of really good conversation time. The other thing that did was to thank the board for approving panel fees. So the $250 that we are now paying panelists. One of the panelists who is, I would say she's in her early 30s, Latinx woman from Milwaukee, just said, look, I was able to put in this many hours because, as a panelist, because of this fee. I probably would have been able to put in even more time and gone deeper into the support materials if the fee had been higher. But she's someone who is making her life work by these different income streams, and she is so not alone. This is a theme that we're hearing a lot in the individual artist town halls, the two of them that we had, and the Wisconsin Visual Artists Organization is really moving this piece forward too, the labor standards for individual artists. So it was interesting to have that piece rise up within this panel discussion too. So a long way of saying thank you all so much for that. It's critical for being able to pay artists in this time and place, and to leave that topic open as something we might want to continue exploring in terms of amounts. This year, as Lynn said, we had 18. There weren't a lot in this mix, and those that did make it into phase 2, that were invited into phase 2, they all proved to be, they all made the case that they are certainly ready for public investment in their projects. So I thought it was a very strong panel, and they gave us lots of good information to chew on in the evaluation portion of it. And that's a really long panel report. I'm so sorry. It's like 3 pages, but there we have it. So I wanted to make sure y'all knew exactly what was going on. And here is the list.
Very good. So please review it.
I muted myself. Any conflicts?
This is Karen Ann. I'm going to say create Portage County as a conflict for me.
Okay.
George, do we need to go through the list, or are we just?
Yeah,
Let's
I'll
go out.
through just to make sure that we get it all down.
Yep, it's easier if we do it alphabetically or however George is doing the roster.
So Kevin, you have any conflict?
None.
Jane?
No.
Karen Ann stated hers. John Johnson? Oh, maybe not there. Maybe not there. All right, Leah Colm?
No conflict.
Okay, jump Brian Kelsey?
No conflicts.
Susan Lip?
No conflicts.
Oh my God, what? The universe is shifting. John Potter? All right, Gerard Randall?
No conflicts.
Mary Reinders?
No conflict.
Lynn Ritchie?
No conflict.
Bob Wagner?
No conflicts.
And Matt Wallach?
No conflicts.
Okay, so the first motion is everything but create Portage County.
Right, can we have a motion for the recommendation for the local arts panel, the Creative Communities Program, except for
Create
Kenosha
Portage County.
So moved, Kelsey.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Second?
Second, Lip.
Thank you, Susan. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the panel recommendations, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to Brian and folk arts portion.
Not yet.
No?
You got to do the motion for create Portage County.
Oh, we still have one more to approve. I'm sorry.
Right.
Get a motion to approve.
I've left the room.
Karen Ann has left the building.
So move, Wagner.
Is there a second?
Second, Gerard.
Thank you, Gerard. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, state aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Now we can move forward. Sorry about that. Mr. Kelsey, the folk arts.
He's on the phone somehow, so he's asking for just a second.
Sorry about that. We're having work done at the Players, and that was one of the contractors calling. So thank you for your patience. Yes, so Caitlin and I worked on the Creative Communities and the Folk Arts Apprentice grants. And the first one we're going to look at is the Creative Communities. The panels were the same for each. It was a panel of 5. Unfortunately, Iris had a family medical emergency and notified Caitlin and staff that she was going to be unable to attend, but she did share her feedback with Caitlin, her notes, so that Caitlin was able to share that with the other committee members as they discussed each grant. Caitlin actually represented Iris's comments when we got to the discussion point, but it was agreed at the staff level that Iris would have no scores impacting this grant process. So I was happy to see that we didn't lose any applicants between phase 1 and phase 2. We had 2 panelists. Caitlin, correct me if I'm wrong. We had 2 panelists returning to this, Sally Anna and Josh Chrysler had done this in previous years, which was great to have the consistency between the years. And they were impressed at the breadth and scope of the programs and just how the creative communities and how diverse they were. Caitlin, I'm going to pass it over to you for just going into the deeper side and the recommendations that came out of them. I'll let you talk about some of the issues that Saliana faced in not understanding using the system to be able to view some of the work samples and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, let's be honest, Caitlin did a ton of work on this, as did the panelists, and I was there to be a timekeeper really more than anything, and to use my ears and my stopwatch.
And it was great to have you, Brian. It's always great to have you on this panel. Yeah, the day went really well. Like Brian said, we had 2 return panelists, which is always, it's just helpful to have that perspective of someone who's seen applications in the years before. And they felt that these were all strong applications and recommended that they all be recommended for funding this year. And it was also just a great to have the perspective of a regular applicant. This is more on the apprenticeship program end, but Kripa Bhaskaran is a traditional artist who's applied to the apprenticeship program before. So just welcomed that voice on the panel. And Sergio is fantastic. And it was just a strong, Brian, I think you felt the same way. It was a strong group of panelists, and they gave really thoughtful feedback that I think will be helpful to all of the applicants.
Yeah, very experienced, very thorough, very fair in their review. It's great having Josh. And for those of you guys, Josh comes from Wyoming, and he does Caitlin's job at the Wyoming level. And it's really interesting having another individual's perspective and looking at what they're seeing coming out of Wyoming and bringing that experience to the panel. But Kripa was great to have on there, as Caitlin said, having someone who's a folk panelists themselves. And then Sergio, who is with Marquette University, offered some great feedback and some great insight into the applicants. So I think it was a very diverse group who were reviewing the creative communities and the folk apprenticeships, and were asking some really good and educated questions. Very valid.
Absolutely. And the creative communities, they were impressed more on the creative communities end with the geographic diversity, and that's just the diversity of the programs that were proposed this year. It was really helpful to have Sergio's perspective on this panel, because 3 of the 6 applications were either Latinx led or focus on Latinx traditions or art forms. So just a really thoughtful voice there. The tech issue that Brian mentioned is just another thing we'll kind of incorporate into the orientation process moving forward. I really thought it was helpful in transitioning to Zoom orientations in the last year or 2 to be able to record those orientations and then make them available to the panelists. But it's just a good reminder to say, hey, just, you got to go here to look for them if you want to return to them, because Saliana was having some issue with video work samples, and it was because she was reviewing a downloaded PDF version rather than the version in her browser. So just good notes to take into next year's orientation process. But overall, a great panel, and like we said, they recommended all 6 for funding. So I will share my screen with those now.
They were also close in scores as well. And can I sing to the unsung hero, who's the silent but affirmative Dale Johnson, for all the work you do on this, Dale, behind the scenes. I understand it's a long process for you sitting there waiting for numbers to be handed to you, but you do such a great job in being able to turn things around and share that data. So thank you.
And pulling up work samples in a pinch.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Thank you, Dale.
All right.
Excellent.
Please review for conflicts.
Call us out, George.
Will do. Kevin Miller.
No conflicts.
Jane Herring.
No conflicts.
Karen Ann Hoffman.
None.
John Johnson. That's right, he's not on right now. Brian Kelsey.
No conflicts.
Leah Kolb.
No conflicts.
Susan Lipp.
No conflicts.
Todd Potter.
None.
Gerard Randall.
No conflicts.
Mary Reinders.
No conflicts.
Lynn Ritchie.
No conflicts.
Bob Wagner.
No conflicts.
And Matt Wallach.
No conflicts.
Excellent. Let's have a motion to approve the Creative Communities panel recommendations for folk arts.
So moved, Kelsey.
Thank you, Brian. A
Second, Hoffman.
Thank you, Karen Ann. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Excellent. Moving
All right.
on now to the folk arts with our team of Caitlin and Brian.
Yeah, I don't have a lot more to add. Caitlin, I just want to point out that there was a panelist who did add, as they were looking at some of the various skills, and not skills, it's the actual cultural side of the work that people are doing. And a panelist had suggested adding a question about the historical and cultural significance of each of the traditional art forms. And they know that this type of question is probably going to require a lot of research, but they thought ultimately it might help the applicant better understand the need and how well represented it is served in the community. The other thing I thought was really interesting, and Caitlin, I'll let you speak more on it, was when Saliana was talking about the understandings of rose mowing. From a Norwegian standpoint, there is a level that you can reach, and like all these individuals who practice this traditional art form, in a sense, aspire to this top level that is recognized in Norway. And were there any other things that any of the other the variety of the apprentices of the work they're doing, is there anything else they were aspiring to? And I think really looking at just the critical nature, so that we weren't seeing all of one type coming through the process. There also were some geography questions at times, like, okay, you know, what if this person has someone from Illinois crossing the border and taking their class, but it's, you know, it's a Wisconsin offered. So they were very thoughtful in asking some pretty good questions. So I'll pass it back over to Caitlin.
Yeah, I second that, all of that, Brian. I think that on this one, on the apprenticeship side, you know, a little less geographic diversity was another point. You know, we see a lot of Madison area and Milwaukee area applications. And then the question about, you know, there were half of the applications to the Creative Communities program were, like I said, Latinx led or focusing on Latinx traditions. And we didn't see any in the apprenticeship program. So that was just an interesting piece. And Sergio, as a historian, brought up that kind of cultural and historical significance piece that you mentioned, Brian, in saying, you know, I just want to hear a little more about that cultural significance here in Wisconsin, because I see it more broadly, but I want to know about its practice a little bit more in Wisconsin. So that's something I will definitely, you know, I'll compare to other states' applications and just sort of ask around to people like Josh and how they incorporate that into the application. And then Sergio also said, you know, he's part of this new Wisconsin Latinx History Collective, and said, reach out. We have branches all over the state, and we could help promote the program to individual artists. So that is something else I'll follow up on. I think that's all I have to add on this one. I mean, it was we looked at the ranked average scores, and it was really clear immediately that there was one outlier, unfortunately. And I will reach out with additional feedback for that applicant, but all, you know, the top 12 applications were really well reviewed.
Yeah, and can I say just that lets you know the quality of the applications that were coming. They were not easy scores, but I thought I have not seen this happen before, that it was 92 and higher, like the rating level. So that should let us know the skill level of those who are coming through this. It speaks volumes. And with the one individual that Caitlin will work with her to better understand what would better help. And we made it really clear to the panelists. So I think at times they get concerned that they're being critical, and we remind them that if they're on the watching YouTube live, you're giving them what they need to help better their applications. So.
All right,
All right.
please review for conflict.
Yep.
All right, Mr. Miller,
No conflicts.
Jane Herring,
No conflicts.
Karen Ann Hoffman,
None.
thank you. Brian Kelsey,
No conflicts.
Leah Kolb,
No conflicts.
Susan Lipp,
No conflicts.
John Potter,
None.
Gerard Randall,
No conflicts.
Mary Reinders,
No conflicts.
Lynn Ritchie,
No conflicts.
Bob Wagner,
None.
Matt Wallach.
Excellent. Can we have a motion to approve the Folk Arts Apprenticeship Panel recommendations?
So moved, Kelsey.
Second Lip.
Thank you, Brian. A second.
Second
Thank you,
Lip.
Susan. Any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, state aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Excellent.
So Kevin, before we move on, I just want to underscore what's been said here and applaud your staff, Karen and Caitlin and Dale, for the work they did, because not only is this work difficult when we're all together in the same space, but now add coming from 4 different locations and panelists coming from Zoom all over the place, understanding the technology, making the technology work for the review process, and then, you know, the care and feeding of both applicants and panelists to get them to know what they're doing, both to apply and then to adjudicate the applications. It's really important work that's being done, and it's amazing what's being done given all of the challenges that have been thrown in their way. So I just wanted to make sure you understood that. I know you do, but wanted to put it on the record, shall I say.
Yeah, we'll touch base with this in my report too, George, but yeah, staff has really done, I think, the state art scene a huge line, heavy lifting over this year, going on a year and a half, right? So we'll touch. It's gonna be a part of my report, so we'll save this for a little bit. So, but thanks for sharing that with us, and our board members who help chair those panels. Thank you for that service. I always enjoyed that. You learn a great deal, but thank you again for your service. All right, let's move on to creative aging and Wisconsin telestories. Karen.
Thank you, Kevin. And I just wanted to throw a little more light onto Caitlin and Dale on the tech stuff related to the panels. They carried the vast majority of that. So thanks very much. The other piece, which I think has been said in some of the panel reports, but I'll just put it out there for all of them. The fact that nonprofit organizations around the state were able to come up with projects, continue that momentum, apply for them. We've had a number of conversations with applicants about what a heavy lift was this year. And it was a really heavy lift. So the fact that the numbers are lower this year is still, it's amazing that there are as many as there are and as many strong ones as there are. So excited to follow up with those applicants and follow up with some of the panel comments specifically on some of the topics that they brought up during the discussion. I also want to say what a great gift this time has been in terms of pushing us into the getting these panel meetings on YouTube, because the number of responses that we've gotten as people are watching live and then following up has been remarkable and sometimes helpfully critical, but always glad to have access to the conversation as it happens and up close and personal in a way that as you're sitting on the outskirts of a room, in the past, you haven't had that level of
Karen,
interaction. Yeah.
Can I echo on that as well? It was one of
Yeah.
the key takeaways that I was looking at was that we were streaming these on YouTube. It broke down the barriers of accessibility for individuals spread across the state to actually see how this happens. It, you know, pulled the curtain back on what goes on, and it didn't force them into a room and feeling awkward of stepping in and not, you know what I mean? It gave them an opportunity to anonymously, in a sense, watch how this worked and to be able to listen to all the grants and to go back and watch a recording of it. And I think ultimately it was easier for folks. And I think ultimately we're going to get better applications. And I think we probably need to be looking at this moving forward as well as to, you know, with the technology we've been using, it's not going away. And how can we continue to use it to better this process? So whether we're live streaming from a room onto YouTube, I think we should consider continuing this.
Thank you for saying that. I totally concur. I think the staff does totally concur on that. We'll figure out a way to keep this piece as we move forward. And speaking of breaking barriers, thank you for that, Brian. The Time Slips Wisconsin Telestories project and partnership is proceeding apace. We have received the funding from the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies and Aroha Philanthropies, and it is now in the state system. And we now, I believe, have access to it after some remarkable calisthenics to help our friends at DOA understand that this is not a procurement issue. So George is so good at shining the light on staff. I'm just going to shine it back for a minute, even though y'all know how great he is. Because there was a point where my head was really seriously about to explode, and he was that intermediary voice between the passionate grant proposal writer. We've got this grant. It's really important to do this work, and our friends at DOA who are like, but you know, you didn't dot that I. You didn't. That's not fair. You didn't follow the process that we have. So he's awesome. So we have the money. The work has actually started, even though Time Slips has not yet received payment. And to remind you all, this project is to connect 4 artists who applied, have been selected and hired, and are now doing the work in both the Brown County region and the central Wisconsin region of Wisconsin, to connect them with 10 older adults each who have been socially isolated, physically isolated within this time. And it's a pilot project that we hope will then be seen at the showcase, at the culminating showcase of this project, by other aging and disability resource centers and by other artists and arts organizations who are interested in this work of creative aging, so that it can be replicated in some way, in some form throughout the state. It's a way for us to get Time Slips' name and work out there around the state and frankly beyond. It's also a way to do this creative aging work in a way that we would never have been able to do it if we didn't have this grant. So Time Slips staff is on it. The artists are working it. I'm looking forward to connecting with them next week to hear how it's going so far. They began at the end of last month, so last week, I think. And please put on your calendar, June 25th, from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock. This is when the culminating virtual showcase will occur. The older adults who want to will participate via video, and the 4 artists and the lead artists will participate. They'll talk about the process. They'll show the work that has come from this process, and hopefully they'll take a lot of calls and questions from the people who are watching. We're going to do a follow-up, as I said, with all of the ADRCs and arts groups that are interested in this work, and even those who aren't yet interested in this work, to come and then find out what needs to happen moving forward to disseminate this work further around the state. So that's what's going on with the Wisconsin Telestories. The concept, again, artists calling older adults for a half hour a week for 8 weeks. And within that process, having creative conversations, asking beautiful questions, and creating artwork together. There it is.
All right. Thank you, Karen. I'm interested to hear that this is our Arts Board member report. What's going on in your area that you would like to share with us? And I'm going to limit it to one thing, one really cool thing that you believe is going on right now, because even though a lot of it's virtual, we could spend, an hour talking about this. So for time sake purposes, let's keep it to one really great, what you believe, activity that's going on right now. And curious to see if anything's in person yet. So George, let's do it alphabetical,
All right.
just like we've been. Serves us well.
All right, we'll do it. So we'll put you back in the alphabet, so we won't make you go first. That means Jane, you're up.
All righty. Mine's more of an economic development thing. What I'm seeing in Kenosha is we have a downtown redevelopment plan going. We have an uptown where they had the riots and the buildings were burned plan going on. And then the Kenosha Innovation Neighborhood, which is where they had torn down major Chrysler plants. And what I'm seeing in each of these development plans is that public art is part of what's being considered. A new performing arts center is under consideration and well underway in the planning in our downtown area. So I'm just glad to see that arts are being included in these major economic development plans. It does emphasize that our city leaders are recognizing the importance of the arts.
Great. Thank you. Karen Ann, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. So kudos to Create Portage County, who received a grant to install between 10 and 15 murals across Portage County, all centered on the celebration of the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. The first of the paintings is set to begin this afternoon. So art goes on.
Thank you. I saw that John Johnson popped back on. Are you there, John?
Yes, I am.
So we're going,
Sorry,
Kevin called out one thing that's going on in your area that you want to highlight at this point.
One thing that's going on in my area.
Right, whether that's DPI or Madison or however you want to define your area.
Well, I think the big thing is transition to a new state superintendent is a big deal. And I think we also will have some transition in the arts and the music creativity world as well at DPI. And so George and I talked about some of that. That's important. And I want you to all know that the new state superintendent, Jill Underley, is a musician. She plays keyboards, plays organ in a church when she can, and she also is in a band playing keyboards. So that's kind of exciting.
That's great. Thank you. Brian, you're up next.
Sorry about that. No, you didn't lose me. I am multitasking away as I am doing what many organizations are doing, is desperately trying to get documentation to Actors Equity so that we're actually able to open our doors. So the one thing to share in Door County is the visual arts are reopening. The Peninsula School of Art is holding classes. They're in the midst of their capital campaign as they moved ahead with things because they needed to be able to get classes back in session for young adults and students and adults using social distancing. So everyone's approaching it in their unique way. Some theaters in Door County have announced seasons. We have not, because no one has received equity approval yet, and I'm not willing to announce a season until I know I'm going to have a season for sure. So keep your fingers crossed for theaters. Broadway is planning a reopening in September. Equity has changed a lot of the guidelines that we talked about. We went from a 30-page reopening guidelines to a worksheet. Some of it is they kind of buried or sunk the iceberg that takes the Titanic down when it comes to ventilation systems, but it's still popping back up and hitting theaters very hard. So there are some pretty significant challenges we're facing, and their guidelines are only good through June 30th, at which point they will revisit and could change everything beginning July 1st. So we're trying to open. Peninsula Players is trying to do a smaller season than we've ever done before, in a very limited season. So just, I know Door County will be popular this summer as it was last summer. We were considered a safe haven. So I think the independent galleries, a lot of them had great years. I know Edgewood Orchard Galleries had a great season last year. Door County was considered one of those safe places to go. And I think that'll continue this year. And hopefully those people who discovered us last year who come back this year will understand that there's a huge arts presence as more of us open back up.
Great. Thank you. Leah? There she is. It's always fun to figure out where you ended up on the screen.
I can never like find, like there's so many screens open and I can never find the one I need. That's what's going on. There's a lot going on. I feel like Amoka is open, with limited, I think it's Friday, Saturday, Sundays, noon to 6. So that's exciting. We have a few new shows that are going to be going up in the coming months. The shows we have up now, I think, are really great. I know that Chazen is open as well. I think you have to make an appointment there. So it's been nice to be able to go back into museums for the first time in a really long time. It's just been extremely lovely to look at art again in person.
Don't you have a little piece of news that you'd like to share personally?
Oh, I just finally finished my my master's degree from the Bowl Center. And so it's been a long, arduous year. So thank you. And thank you to my committee who's been so patient with me as I have been not totally on top of things as I wanted to be. But now we're in a new space, so it's going to be great.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Susan Lepp.
I only have to do one. That's really hard. I have to throw in a second one. Opera in the Park is a go right now on July 24th, and which is pretty exciting for Madison Opera. We don't know if it really is going to happen or not, but we are doing, Jonathan and I do the sound, so got to make sure that it really is happening. But I want to talk about the Wisconsin Chamber Orchestra Concert on the Square, which is a really big deal for everybody. 40,000 people a week usually go to it. Is not going to be on the Capitol Square. It will be at Breeze Stevens this year, but it will be happening. We're selling tables right now. We're selling blankets. And if people want to go and just sit in the bleachers at Breeze Stevens, those are going to be tickets for the first time that anybody has had to pay to go to see anything from the Chamber Orchestra, but all of the money is going to the performers. Because Chamber Orchestra is one of the few places that has kept all of their performers paid all year. And so this is an exciting thing. And it's starting on July 7th and will run for 5 weeks. And actually, the board has been talking about maybe the last one will be able to be done on the square. We don't know though.
Yeah, that's exciting.
But, so hardly any people.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And just as he's supposed to come up, he disappeared from my screen. Mr. Miller, are you there? You're next. And you're muted. You're muted.
I had a little glitch there. It was really heartened to hear the promotion. The Eau Claire Jazz Fest just happened here a week or so ago, and I spent a lot of time lately listening to Wisconsin Public Radio and the classical music, and it was a constant tool for promotion. It was a virtual performance, but they also then had record turnout for a virtual concert. And it showed the passion, the history. And that being said, Wisconsin Public Television's done a fantastic documentary about the Eau Claire Jazz Festival, from the creation of it. It really was impressive, the amount of artists who's been to Eau Claire and performed. It's mind blowing, and it also paints a really wonderful picture, I think, and something we don't think of this region, with that kind of quality artists coming, from major venues across the world, would be here in small town Wisconsin. And it really kind of gave me a nice boost to know that it's still ticking, still keep going, and people are so passionate about jazz up here in the western woods here of Wisconsin. And I recommend watching the documentary. It's a great piece of history for our state.
That's great. Thank you. Up to you, John Potter.
I'll just mention that the Phipps Center for the Arts in Hudson continues to produce an exhibit, as they have since last fall, with CDC protocols in place. And this month we'll have a series of 3 indoor concerts with a beer garden on the patio. So life goes on.
It's important to note. Thank you. Gerard.
Those are touch and go, but the 2 largest of the festivals are go for in-person. That's State Fair and Summerfest. Summerfest has changed its dates to the first 3 weekends, Thursday, Friday, Saturday in September. The biggest thing in person on the cultural front is a collaboration between museums, the U.S. debut of the Mandela exhibit. They had a preview a couple of weeks ago that was online, and this in-person exhibit is really phenomenal. It's here until August 1st, and I would encourage you to encourage others to take advantage of the exhibit while it's here.
And just in case you heard breaking up as I did at the beginning of Gerard's report, we're talking about American Black Holocaust Museum and the Milwaukee Public Museum in collaboration. So that's looking like a really amazing exhibit. Thank you. Mary Reinders.
We're really happy that Mount Horeb is coming back online after being closed down for quite a while. A lot of events were canceled last year, so they're coming back hard with their 50th anniversary of the art fair that'll be going on. And what I'm really gratified to see is that there's more collaboration going on. There's more arts integration going on. There's close work with the area restaurants. So there'll be artisan food incorporated. There'll be more performances from bands. There'll be an arts education booth, as well as cultural and historic learning with a Norwegian piece of the heritage here, along with showcasing wonderful area art for sale. So it's going to be, I think, there's going to be a richer deliverable, but there's also going to be more interest, I think, of people coming into the area to actually experience it. And I think it's a model for small towns who want to use art and integrate sort of the full spectrum art to re-engage and enliven the scene locally.
That's great. Thank you. And then Richie, you're up.
So our little area, our 13 little groups of artists around, you can see that things are starting to pick up. When you read the newsletters, a lot of different classes are being restarted. Of course, COVID safe, but it's really nice to see a lot of music venues are going on. And just a really important FYI, the zombies are going to be rising this Halloween in Land O'Lake. So come on up.
That's a very important note. We should put that out to all the zombie-feared people that they should know the zombies are rising. This is good. Good. Bob Wagner.
Gerard covered the big things going on in the city, but what I see in the North Shore and even in Ozaki County, I have several friends who are in bands, and they've got 5 or 6 gigs scheduled for this year from 0 last year, or 1. I also saw that there's several one-man shows that are going on, including one in Door County at the Shakespeare Theater. Instead of having big groups at the theaters, they're having small groups. So I'm getting mixed messages. Strawberry Festival has been canceled in Cedarburg, and that was always a big 100,000 plus person draw. It's been canceled. I would say that there's still a lot of discomfort with COVID and what people are going to do. The decisions haven't been made. Things have been slid back. I'm not the total optimist that it's opening up the way that I hear.
To give you an update, Bob, I mean, Door Shakespeare, yeah, they're looking to do a one-person version of Hamlet, but they still don't have approval to do that outside because of housing, because they want certified people to come in with certified balancing HVAC specialists to look at the cabin they're renting for the actor to show that it's safe. So they're also moving bleachers around so that they can try to get 75. So Peninsula Players, you understand, we seat 621. We will probably only be able to seat up to 125 people, and no one is doing concessions.
Oh, well, and I have a friend that's acted up at Shakespeare for a couple of years, and of course he's not going this year. He wasn't the chosen. Thank you.
All right. Last but not least, Mr. Wallach.
Thanks. Let's see, I'll give a small update. The Overture Galleries, I believe it's this fall, are doing an exhibition on COVID-19. And I mentioned this to some of my staff, so people you wouldn't traditionally think of those engaged in the arts. So you have like epidemiologists and data scientists, and I've never seen so much excitement. So I have a number of people who are plotting off work time, of course, to put together some submission on the visualization of the science of COVID-19. So yeah, pass that along.
Great. You know, I was listening into a well-being webinar from the Metropolitan Group yesterday, and I captured this quote from one of the people, and I think it's apropos to what you just said. One of the people said, "We need to pause, reflect, and process what we've been through." And I thought immediately when they said that, who does that better than the artists themselves? So
right.
it absolutely hits right where you're talking. And I'll just put this note out there. I attended the American Players Theater's announcement of their season. And I think it's instructive to this whole conversation, because in a theater that's outdoors that seats 1,000 people, they're only going to have 250 people in the seats. And in their indoor facility, they're going to have only 30 people in the audience. And so when you think about that, and you think about what Brian's been talking about all day, how does it work? How do the numbers work, right? Because the admission at the revenue for admissions is not going to be anywhere near where it was. In the first year of COVID, people's donations met or exceeded what had happened or what they thought that might happen, because they were helping organizations through that tough period. Now in this second COVID year, will that still continue? Part of why everybody was doing things virtually was to maintain that connection to their members, to their donors, to everybody, to keep those relationships going. But I think it's really important as we think about the rescue plan, and we think about, Brian thinking about the shuttered venues things and all of those kinds of programs. We're not by any stretch out of the woods, and we're not even talking about the artists themselves. I will send you after this meeting Americans for the Arts' most recent report, of COVID's impact on the field. They update it every week, so I'll just send you this week's copy. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. Okay. Mr. Chair, back to you.
Okay, real quick, given a lot of thought to how I was going to phrase this. And it's kind of an overview of the last, how long have I been on the board now? 8 years. And for the last year and a half, there are times where it felt like gloom and doom, right? And how are we going to get through this? The words, oh my God, would go screaming through my brain, when I think back to what it would be like to be running an art center, not-for-profit art center right now. So my colleagues that are still in that industry, my heart's continually going out to them and to the artists. And then I look at where the arts board is, and it's hit me so hard how important the board is and the staff to keep this going. I think we're going to emerge from this and we're going to be stronger. The art scene, if nothing else, it's reiterated the pandemic and all of the protocols keeping us separated from each other, right? We can't wait to be at a concert together. We can't wait to be at an exhibit somewhere, right? Just to have that connection, to see a live performance of a play, to see somebody that's not on Zoom, right? They're with us. And it's reminded Americans, it's reminded the world how important it is. At the same time, we're still struggling, right? We're not through it yet. We've got a lot of battles. There are a lot of folks still struggling out there. But the fact that the arts board, every time George would call me, and I'm always waiting for the next shoe to fall, what? And instead we talk about solutions and funding and numbers that we haven't heard coming to the arts board from emergency. It's always got the word emergency tagged to it. But we've been in an emergency funding situation since I've been a part of the board. So our work hasn't gone unnoticed, even when we thought like 2015, 2014, where it would feel like we're talking to ourselves. George and I, Brian, we had this conversation yesterday where we would, Gerard, when you talked about we need to strategize, who can help us carry the freight, carry the water, it's the budget conversation. And we would have conversations like, does anybody know a guy that knows a guy that knows a guy that can get us a meeting with a guy, right? And it took years before we got in front of the Governor Walker, to begin to make our plea and to get them, to remind them how important we are, not just to our culture, but to our economic health. We have this weird time frame where we are preaching to the choir with our governor, who has, we're front and center with a lot of that relief. Got a lot of work to do with our friends on the Republican side. There are advocates out there that understand how this is all connected. And I would vacillate between just despair and not knowing what to do. And then I talk to George and hear what the staff is doing and how they are staying connected and continually offering support in really great programming for our constituents, keeping the lights on, right? Keeping that flame going. So Karen and Caitlin and Dale and George, I've never been more proud to be a part of the board. So way to go. And I'm also really thrilled that the board, we didn't lose one human. I know it felt like I'm probably gone, right? But I think we're through that time now too. Our committee stayed whole. Our board roster stayed whole. And I'm here to tell you, when we can all get out of this, we're going to be lifting up our sleeves and the really hard work's going to happen. But our staff has really, really made this, I think, set the platform so that we can jump ahead, we can get going and really make our state art scene even stronger. And I think the pandemic has taught how important it is. And thank God for George and his team and for all of you. I think the artists are going to know it. They're going to feel it. And come fall, I hope we all are in the same room with each other. I really do. I can't wait to see y'all. Let's go. I'm emotional. I've never been like this. I blame it on COVID.
That's okay. Matt and I will
Um,
remind you of this moment for years to come.
Yeah, we're never going to speak of this again.
Well, it's recorded
On
on
why
YouTube.
now are you doing your secretary duties? Why now of all time now Wallach is doing his duties? And then something else that I'm really passionate about, George, I'm going to jump ahead. Mr. Wagner and Karen Ann and George, we're getting ready to say goodbye at some point to Mr. Wagner here, but he's going to stay on a little bit longer because the governor's like, hey, Bob had stated that, come May, I'd like to maybe, Bob, how long have you been part of the Wisconsin Arts Board? How long have you served?
If I hadn't looked it up, I wouldn't remember. My memory doesn't go back that far, but it's 18 years.
It was his appointment. I looked at the letter today, February 7th, 2002.
Yeah.
Just so that brings yourself into focus. That's 4 governors.
And that's the way I describe it, that I've made it through 4 governors.
He has indeed.
Two's been bad enough. 4, and but because there's been other things to do, you probably would imagine, on the state government side, and so we're fortunate enough that they haven't got, they will, but they haven't made an appointment, and so Bob is able to continue to serve until they appoint his replacement. So I'm really happy about that because we get to still hang with Bob. But when Bob would step down from service, he would create these wonderful pieces of art to celebrate each board member's service that had retired after a number of years. And so George and I had this conversation last summer. I was like, well, we can't ask Bob to make his own award for goodness
I don't
sake.
want one of those.
What are we gonna do? Well, our great friend Karen Ann has really answered that call. So Karen Ann, I'm gonna turn it over to you real quick, and I hope you're available. My screen is doing weird things. I'm only seeing a few of you. Karen Ann, are you there?
It's still sealed.
Good. You can open it up while. So the dodge I had to give to Bob was, we're gonna send something to all the board members to open up at the meeting. So can you tell me where you're gonna have the meeting? And I'll also say, as he opens this up, we reached out to Joe to ask the question, what do you get for the guy who made the awards for everybody else? And she had a great suggestion, which led us to Karen Ann. And if Karen Ann does not jump back on, she actually sent me an email, which I will read to you. I had asked her to say it out loud, but if she is unable to get back on, I'll just read that to you quickly.
Looks like a little boy at Christmas.
Yeah.
I haven't outgrown it yet.
I hope none of us ever outgrow it.
Am I supposed to be opening it?
Yes, sir.
All right. It's lunchtime, but I don't think it's a snack.
Definitely not. I wouldn't be eating it. No, I wouldn't.
Oh my. All right. It's totally amazing. It's Karen Ann's beadwork, raised beadwork. And I've appreciated her work ever since I saw it at the Quilt Museum in person. And this is just, I'm overwhelmed.
Well, she, when we reached out to her, we said, might you have something? She said, no, I will make something. And I'm looking on my phone, so I don't have to open up my computer to read what she wrote, because Bobby was beautiful. And that's the one word answer I gave to her when she wrote it. It was just beautiful. So, oh, come on now.
What's the word for Klemp?
Yeah, right. There you go. I'm a little of a Klemp. All right, I'm going to bring it up on my computer because my phone is not helping me right now.
It's beautiful. It really is great.
And it's got nickels that are pierced here. Buffalo and Indian head nickels.
All right, let's see which one it is. Yeah, here we go. All right, so this is what she wrote, and with apologies for not having her able to say it herself. Here's what she wrote. The evening before the first meeting I went to, this is Karen Andrew, I went down to the bar to see if anyone from the group was there. I didn't know anyone, so I didn't know who to look for. I ordered myself a glass of wine and I took a seat at the bar. I smiled at the various groups already there, but no one made eye contact or returned my greetings. Must not be the folks I'm looking for, I figured. After a bit, a tall, gracious man approached me with a warm smile and a handshake. Hi, he said. I'm Bob. Won't you join us? I will never forget that act of kindness and inclusion.
Payback right here. Boy, oh boy. Absolutely beautiful.
So
I can't wait to give her a hug, and thank you all for the idea.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, you can give the hug to Joe to getting us on the right path.
Yep.
She really did. It is a time to say thank you. You know, Bob has brought to this board many things. He's chaired many committees, many grant tier panels. But you also may or may not know that he brought the creative economy to life at his business by hiring artists as welders. And those artist welders brought forward a whole new product line. And so he could speak from experience as to the value not only of hiring artists, but the creative economy itself. So I'm so happy that you will continue as long as the governor says he hasn't appointed somebody yet. But more importantly, I expect that you will be one of those important alumni members who we will connect back with along the way. So.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's all I can say.
That's all we can say as well. I want to make sure that at this moment we also acknowledge that the governor has reappointed, and they're next to each other on my screen, which is wonderful. John Potter and Gerard Randall have been reappointed by Governor Evers. So they have started a new 3-year term. And now you only have, I don't know how many years that will mean that you have to get to 20, but good luck with that. And I'll point to 3 things. One, you've got the executive director / staff report in your materials. We're trying to do that so that you have a sense of what's going on, so we don't have to take up much time in these meetings to do that. But I also want to point to a couple things. First, the town hall meeting for the artists. The second one of those was held. We have 13 partners and ourselves, so 14 partners doing that work, including the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. And it's been really interesting to hear from the artists and to get the sense that this kind of gathering is going to be important to them even beyond these town meetings. So we'll continue to have them as long as they're necessary, and we're hoping to encourage others of the partners to step up and into those meetings as well, hosting them. I will point to the National Arts Action Summit and the fact that we went to meet with our congressional delegation. I must acknowledge Ann Katz from Arts Wisconsin, who is the state's captain for this work and set up all of those meetings. We had with us this year, because they were virtual, we had Lynn and John Potter, and we had Susan Lipp, and we had Brian Kelsey with us. So that was an amazing thing to be able to do that, and also to have people from the districts speaking with their legislators. It was interesting that the last one was the most engaged with an actual congressperson. because Representative Gallagher joined us on his way from one place to a vote he was taking at the Capitol. And he made special time to be with us in the conversation. He noted that his wife is a Broadway actress, which was revelatory to some of us. And so it was very impersonal, his connection to all of this. But he also had really good questions about the shuttered venue program and the payroll protection program. And so Brian and Kelly Strickland of the Widener Center would be able to answer really specific questions that he had about those programs. But all of the board members were important to telling the stories to the aides that we met with, to make them understand in their district what was going on, so that these things were not abstract concepts, but they were really about what was happening at home. So again, thanks to all of you could take the time this year. And next year, if we're back in DC, you'll either decide to come with us, or maybe there'll be another way to join you in the conversation. And then I'll just point to the other two things that were in as attachments, because they're going to be coming up down the line. We talked today about the Arts and Economics Prosperity 6. And so we're not looking to have approval today, but when we've determined that we have the money to spend, we'll get the approval from you. My guess is there will be a special meeting coming up that will include these three things. Our American Rescue Plan, and how we're going to distribute that money, the budget for fiscal 22, and then the Arts and Economic Prosperity. And then we'll see if it makes sense to do it at that same meeting, but the National Arts Strategies, racial equity principles, and the adoption of those principles, we do need to sit down and really have a conversation about whether this is something the board would like to do. We brought it up, and then COVID has gotten in our way from having that conversation, but we do need to have it. Anyway, the next time we speak to you, you'll know that we're going to be moving in July. So your staff on May 21st will be a historic day, because all four of us will be here at the office to talk about what it is we got to do to get the move prepared. So that'll be the first time the four of us in the same space since March of last year. At that, I think that's enough of my report.
George, can I add something?
Of course you can.
Two things I'd like to add is yesterday was the final portion of WIGCOT, which we would normally be at in person. And I think it's important that we take note that this was the first year they had a DEAI Governor's Award on Tourism, and the Milwaukee rep received that award for all of their DEAI critical work that they've done. And they really have been a leader, not just in the arts, but I think for everyone. So I was really excited to see that they had, were the recipient. The other is that the recipient of the Governor's Award for Arts, Culture, and Heritage was the Worm Farm Institute. So I think it was exciting to see that there were some good candidates. George, I believe you reviewed, didn't you? There was a few of us. Yeah. No, you didn't?
This year,
okay.
No. Mary Gilo joined you this year.
Yeah, and I was one of the reviewers this year. And so they were definitely different than previous years, but there were, once again, the arts and the Rising Star had the most applicants. So it was really nice to see people still taking the time as we're filling out grant applications left and right, that people still had an opportunity to fill out forms to actually recognize the great work. So I just wanted to make sure you guys, if you know the Worm Farm Institute, to reach out to them and congratulate them, and to thank Chad, Mark, and the entire team at the Milwaukee Rep for what they're doing on behalf of the DEAI work.
Thank you, Brian. That was important to know.
Good. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, George and team. And with that, I think we're ready to adjourn.
We need it.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Kelsey.
Thank you.
We don't need a second, right?
You don't need a second, but you do need a vote.
Oh, yeah. All right. Do we have a we have a motion on the table to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No.
Yeah, I was